The Souls game's inventory system really hasn't changed much since Demon's Souls. You can use items, drop items, pick up the red Tearstone ring and have it appear in your hotbar as the red sign soapstone. Wait, what? Yeah, the inventory system might have a few flaws. In this video, we'll be exploring how the inventory system actually works, as well as how to break it. Let's begin. We all know the inventory as this nicely sorted system with different categories for item types, where you can easily find the item type you're looking for. But under the hood, that's not what the inventory looks like at all. No, it actually looks like this. If you don't have a background in computer science or reverse engineering, you might be wondering what you're looking at. This is a chunk of the game's memory, specifically the memory that holds the beginning of the character's inventory. Let's look at the first 16 bytes. The first 8 bytes just list the inventory's address in memory. Most PCs currently use the x64 architecture, which means bytes are written as little endian or reverse order of significance. So you don't read this as 800C 5D0C, you read it as 0C 5D0C 80, which as you can see matches the address listed next to it. The following 8 bytes list the size of the inventory. In this case, hexadecimal 800, or in decimal, 2048. So this tells us the inventory can hold up to 2048 unique items. Following that, we have the array of item data that makes up the inventory. Each item entry is hex 1C, or 28 bytes long, and as stated earlier, there are 2048 total entries. The first 4 bytes are an identifier for the item type. In this case, hex 40000000, which tells us the item type is a good. The next 4 bytes are the item's ID, hex 834 or 2100, which tells us that this is the master key. Following that, we have 4 bytes telling us the quantity of the item, just 1 in this case, and the next 4 relate to how the item is shown in the in-game inventory. I'm not exactly sure how these work though. The final 12 bytes, I have no idea what they do. Knowing what they do isn't important for our purposes though. The first 12 bytes contain all of the important info. If we look at another entry down here, we'll see that its item type is hex FF, which is equal to -1 when using a signed 32-bit integer. -1 indicates that the slot is empty, and you'll see it's also used for the item ID. The bytes for displaying the item in the in-game inventory aren't equal to -1 though, which means something was in this slot previously. Interestingly, the game doesn't clear all of an entry's data when the item is removed, just the important parts. Now let's jump forward to Dark Souls 3 and see how the inventory evolved. The first 8 bytes still list the address in memory, and the next 8 still list the size of the inventory, which has shrunk down to 1920 entries. Now, why would they shrink the size of the inventory? They didn't, sort of. Dark Souls 1 reserves the first 64 inventory slots for key items, giving you 1984 slots for other things. In Dark Souls 3, they instead made a second inventory array following the first one in memory, exclusively for key items. This second array can hold up to 128 entries. Combine that with the first one, and they add up to 2048. So there are still 2048 inventory slots available in total, but you lose an additional 64 to key items in Dark Souls 3. Going back to the main inventory, entries are now only 16 bytes. The first 2 bytes seem to be related to the order the item was picked up in, but I'm not sure of its purpose. No idea what the third byte is for, goods always seem to put a value of 0 there though. The fourth byte seems to indicate item type, with hex 80 meaning it's a weapon. The next 4 are the item ID, which has changed slightly. Let's jump down to this entry here. Hex 10000000 is the item type value, armor in this case, and hex 02656740 or 40,200,000 is the item's ID, which is the thief mask. These 2 values are combined together as a single value for the item ID in Dark Souls 3's inventory. The following 4 bytes are still the quantity of the item, and I'm not sure about the final 4. I'm guessing they're still related to display data, but don't take that as a fact. So while the item data has changed a little bit, the functionality of the inventory has remained pretty much the same. Let's go back to Dark Souls 1. Rather than continue to stare at chunks of memory and decipher what they mean, I wrote a tool to monitor the inventory and tell us exactly what's in every slot. As stated earlier, Dark Souls 1 reserves the first 64 indices for key items, so all of the interesting stuff starts at index 64. Unlike how the inventory is shown to you in-game, other than key items, there's no separation between items at all. You may notice that there are 3 fists items. When no weapon is equipped, the game equips one of these hidden fist items to the hand slots. Might seem silly from a player perspective, but from a game dev perspective, it makes sense for setting up animations and damage values. The same is true for the head, body, arms, and legs items, though these ones aren't added to the inventory until the respective slot is unequipped. So if you play through the whole game without ever unequipping your armor, they'll never be added to your inventory. Whenever the player obtains a new item, it goes to the first available index. When an item is used or dropped and its quantity goes to 0, its slot is cleared, and that index becomes available for a new item. This is part of what makes the stale slot exploit possible, with the other part being how the equipment array works. The equipment array is quite simple. Each equipment slot just points to an index in the inventory. For example, if we look at the first left-hand slot, marked as LH1, it points to index 65, which is where the straight sword hilt is. Now that we've looked at the inventory and equipment systems, let's see how the stale slot glitch actually works. For this method, you'll want to have at least 5 of whatever item type you're creating the stale slot for. This prevents the menu from updating when you drop the item. In this case, I'm creating a body stale slot, so I need at least 5 bodies. The first step is getting the items you're using for the glitch in the inventory in the correct order. You don't need to know exactly where they are in the inventory, just where they are relative to each other. So I'll drop both my mask and my body, then pick up the body before the mask. Now I know that the body comes before the mask in the inventory. The next step is the double menu glitch. This specific setup was found by Eloise. First you highlight brightness in the menu, then press A and right bumper at the same time to get the brightness menu over the inventory, just like you were going to do the brightness dupe. Instead of doing the brightness dupe though, you press B, then left bumper twice to end up back at the inventory. From there, use your mouse to go over to the armor category, find the body you're using, and bring up a drop prompt on it. Don't confirm it though. Now with the mouse, click on the equipment tab. The equipment menu will now be open behind the inventory. It's kinda hard to see, but you should be able to see stuff being highlighted. Click on the body slot, then find your body, and highlight it. Note that the first item will be behind the item category bar, so if your body is the first thing in the list, you'll want to put the mouse on the category bar. Use your controller, and press A once to confirm the drop prompt. The inventory slot will be cleared. Press A again to equip the body we already dropped. The body slot will now be pointing to the empty index. Ergo, it has a stale reference to the slot the body was in, hence the name stale slot. As I mentioned earlier, when the player obtains an item, it goes to the first available inventory index. So if we drop the thief mask and pick it up, it'll go to slot 68 where the body was, and now the chest slot is pointing to the mask. If we go through a loading screen, the chest model will disappear as it doesn't have a reference to a proper model anymore. In this case, the glitch is purely cosmetic. Your body doesn't take on the properties of the mask. The mask wasn't directly equipped to the body slot, so the game doesn't load its info. Now that we know how the stale slot glitch works, let's look at some actual uses for it. Goods and rings happen to have some IDs that overlap. We can take advantage of that to have the game interpret certain rings as consumable items. In this case, I'm using the Covenant of Artorias. I'm using black fire bombs to set up the slot, so I drop all of them, and the ring, then pick up the bombs before the ring to make sure they come first in the array. I then move the bombs to the first spot in the in-game inventory, just so I know where they are. Setting up the stale slot afterwards works exactly the same as it did for the chest slot, just make sure you drop the entire stack of the item you're using. For finding the first good slot, I just highlight the second right-hand slot and move the mouse to the right until it stops being highlighted. I moved the bombs to the top of the item list, so I know they're going to be the first thing in the list, hidden behind the category bar. Now that the stale slot is set up, just drop the ring, pick it up, and bam! C9 obtained. What is C9? Dark Souls originally was going to have items that let you join the Covenants. These were cut, but their data remains in the game. You can see that I'm in the Forest Hunter Covenant. After using the item, I'm now in the Dark Moon Blade Covenant. Note that using a ring as an item will consume it, so the Covenant of Artorias is destroyed. Fortunately, it's a key item and can be recovered from the lost item chest. Other rings will be gone permanently, however. If we do the same thing we just did with the Dusk Crown ring, we'll get the Black Eye Orb. But not just any Black Eye Orb, Shiva's Black Eye Orb. So this is an alternative way to play the Cut Shiva invasion. You will lose the Dusk Crown ring as a result though. There's one more niche use for stale slots, smuggling the Covenant of Artorias into New Game Plus. This was originally found by Androv T, but was thought to not work on Remastered. I played around with it a bit, and as it turns out, it does work on Remastered. Like all of the other setups, the first thing is getting the items in the correct order. In this case, we want to put the mask first, then the body, and finally the ring. Next, we want to get a stale slot using the body. Following that, we drop the mask, then pick up the body, then the mask. Now the chest slot should be pointing to the slot the mask is in. Next, we're going to take advantage of the game not checking other slots for armor being equipped. Do the double menu glitch, and bring up a drop prompt on the mask. Use the mouse to go to the equipment screen, into the head slot, and equip the mask. Go back to the head slot again, and highlight the mask, and then confirm the drop, then re-equip the mask. Both the head and chest slots are now pointing to where the mask was. Drop the Covenant of Artorias, and pick it up. Both the head and chest slots are now pointing to it. Next, equip the ring. The game will check the other slots to see if it's equipped, but it stops checking once it finds the first slot it's equipped in, so it unequips it from the head slot, but leaves the chest slot intact. You're now ready to head into New Game Plus. Upon completion, the game removes the ring from the inventory, and unequips it from the first slot it finds it in, which is the chest slot. As a result, the ring is left equipped in the ring slot, even though we no longer actually have it. From there, you can immediately do Seal Skip and fight the Four Kings without having to interact with Sif at all. The original version of Dark Souls 1 also has other ways to achieve stale slots thanks to the menu not clearing actions. Queue an item use out of an action, then go into the menu and equip the item after it's been used, and bam, stale slot achieved. The same method works for getting a stale slot in Demon's Souls as well, though you have to time equipping the item properly, as the menu will update when the item is consumed. I also don't know which goods IDs, if any, overlap in Demon's Souls, so I have no idea if stale slots have any uses. But hey, I at least confirmed they're possible. If you watched my previous video, you'll already know that Dark Souls 3 has an arrow stale slot glitch as well, discovered by Eloise. For those that didn't watch that video, this is how it works. You need Yol at Firelink, and at least 2 undead bone shards. You'll also want to have gone through Yol's talk option to get the gesture out of the way. From there, leave and pick up the arrows you're using to move them to the first available inventory slot. After that, you need to shove Yol all the way over to the bonfire. Using force speeds up this process significantly. You'll want to position him roughly on the second ring of steps from the bonfire. You can check that he's in the right spot by speaking to him, then moving to the opposite side of it. If you exit his dialogue range when you get over there, you're good to go. From there, you'll want to speak to him and highlight his talk option. Then turn towards and walk in range of the bonfire. With frame-perfect timing, you can rest at the bonfire after selecting talk. This is much easier if you bind interact to the scroll wheel. Now bring up a prompt to burn a bone shard, but don't confirm it until his dialogue completely finishes. When it does, confirm the prompt, and Yol's menu will be open again. Choose Draw Out True Strength, and wait for the level up screen to appear. When it does, back out of it, and you'll now be in the bonfire menu, but with your character standing. Move to the opposite side of the bonfire to exit Yol's dialogue range. Now for the hard part. Choose to burn another bone shard, and right before the menu reappears, start firing your bow. Quickly go to the storage box and bring up a prompt to store your arrows. Normally the game will force you to keep at least one of an equipped arrow, but because we fired one after we brought up the prompt, we can store all of them instead. The arrows are still technically equipped, but their inventory slot is empty, so if we go buy a spell, it'll go into that slot, and we now have a spell in our arrow slot. This works similarly to what we did with the Covenant of Artorias in Dark Souls 1. The slot is emptied, but the item isn't unequipped, so the equipped item retains its properties, in this case, Millwood Great Arrows. The reason I went with the spell here is that they're never consumed, so putting a spell in the slot gives us unlimited of whatever arrow type we used. And as long as you disable the auto refill on the arrows beforehand, the spell will stay in the slot unless you remove it yourself. To quickly talk about Bloodborne and Elden Ring, Bloodborne has no known stale slot glitches. Elden Ring reportedly does have one, but there's little info about it available. All I could find on it was that it requires standing with the grace menu open, and requires the stone sword key glitch, aka stoned, so it doesn't work on current patch. But enough about stale slots, let's move on to a far more powerful equipment glitch, equip slot manipulation. Equip slot manipulation lets you access equipment slots via index rather than via item type. This makes it possible to equip any item to any slot. Want to equip your body in every armor slot? ESM has you covered. Want to equip your mask to your hand and have it appear as a hand of God? ESM again has you covered. So how exactly does it work? In Demon Souls' case, you first open the equipment screen and go into one of the slots for the item type you want to equip. The game will remember this item type. From there, you need to find an NPC with a single line of dialogue that plays when attacked. The Worshipper of God works, and she's available as soon as you arrive at the Nexus. Backstab the NPC, highlight the equipment tab, and start mashing X. If done right, you'll cancel the NPC's dialogue and prevent it from fully closing the menu, leaving you with this glitched menu. As mentioned earlier, the glitched menu lets you equip items to the equipment array based on index. So how does that work? It's actually more simple than it may seem. Each equipment slot represents a number from 0 to 17. These numbers start at the top row and go left to right. You may notice that 15 is missing. This isn't a mistake, the equipment array includes a slot for the character's hair. 15 is the hair slot, and it can't be accessed through the menu. These numbers tell us which index of the equipment array, as it's laid out in memory, we're going to be accessing. Rather than sit here and explain which slot is at each index, I made a visual for it. I'll upload this image and link it in the description if you want it for later reference. Now to clarify what I'm talking about here, this image tells you which slot you need to go into to equip an item to the desired slot. For example, if I want to equip something to the head slot, I don't go to the head slot, I instead go to the third item slot. If I want to equip something to the first right-hand slot, I go into the second left-hand slot, and so on. And yes, you can equip items to your character's hair slot with ESM. As far as I can tell though, all it does is make your character bald. The only slot that can't be accessed with ESM is the third item slot because it's at index 15, which is pointed at by the hair slot. As stated previously, which items you can equip is based on the last slot you entered before triggering the glitch. I went into an armor slot beforehand, so I can now equip any piece of armor in my inventory to any of the slots. Items with overlapping IDs will appear as whatever the equivalent item for the respective slot is, so in this case the Assassin's Mask appears as a Hand of God. ESM is also possible in the original version of Dark Souls 1, though the method of achieving it is completely different. In Dark Souls 1, you first need to get at least 10,000 weight in your inventory. An easy way to do this is to prompt swap from the wooden arrows to the bastard sword in Andre's menu, and buy 2 glitch stacks of 999 bastard swords. This will put you well over the required 10,000 weight. From there, equip any ring other than the Fat Ring, and a weapon with a long attack animation. Next, go into the slot of the item type you want to equip. I'm using a body in this case. Perform an attack, and while the attack animation is still playing, try to go into the slot pointing to the slot you want to equip an item to. I'm trying to access the head slot, which is pointed at by the second left-hand slot. You'll hear a noise confirming you tried to access the slot. Now try unequipping the ring. A message box that's very confused about dialogue will pop up. Confirm it, and you'll be in the menu for the last slot you accessed. Choose the desired item, and bam, ESM achieved. I'll leave a link to the Souls speedrun wiki page on ESM in the description. It goes into more details about the glitch, including a chart of where each equipment slot points. Now, why exactly does this happen? I'm not sure on all of the details, but it relates back to leftovers from Demon Souls. In Demon Souls, there's a stat called Item Burden. Item Burden is similar to Encumbrance from the Elder Scrolls games. Every item in the game has a weight value and contributes to the total burden. Where this system differs from Encumbrance is that in Demon Souls, if an item would overburden you, you can't pick it up at all. Now in Dark Souls, they decided to get rid of this system, except they didn't really. They just swept it under the rug, so to speak. They made it so only equipment has weight, as they kept the equip burden system, or equip load as it's called in Dark Souls, and set the max item burden value to 10,000, probably assuming nobody would ever reach it in a normal playthrough. The other part of it is that Demon Souls has a ring called the Ring of Herculean Strength. The ring increases max item burden. Normally you can equip and unequip the ring no problem, but if unequipping the ring would put you over the max item burden, the game gives you a prompt telling you that you can't unequip it. See the relationship yet? Yep, that confused dialogue prompt is the remnants of this prompt from Demon Souls. As for why it directly causes ESM, I'm not really sure. I'm guessing whatever the related functions were for item burden were cut out pretty hastily and left the system in a very broken state. Unfortunately, ESM doesn't work on Dark Souls Remastered. You can still buy 2 stacks of Bastard Swords and verify that you're exceeding the 10,000 item burden by dropping another piece of equipment. If you can't pick it up, you're overburdened. Unequipping a ring afterwards does nothing, however. No confused dialogue prompt and no equip screen following it. So as of now, ESM is only possible in the original version of Dark Souls and Demon Souls. And that about covers it for the inventory. But speaking of Demon Souls, I just wanted to quickly talk about how largely unexplored it is for glitches. As I showed earlier, stale slots are a thing, but you won't find any documentation of that. Move swap is also a thing, there is also no documentation of it. While there are a few video examples of ESM, there was no documentation on where each slot pointed until I looked at it, and it's still almost completely unexplored in terms of overlapping IDs. Basically, if a glitch exists in Dark Souls 1, there's a pretty good chance that it exists in Demon Souls as well, but hasn't been documented. Considering that a lot of Dark Souls glitches work on Demon Souls, I wonder. Oh no. Oh no, not again! Anyway, that's about it for this video. I hope you found it informative or entertaining, and I will see you guys in another video.